Okay, so we're live. We're talking about
Perfect.
startups, and Iona is here. How do I say your name correctly?
Ioanna.
I got it wrong.
It's
Iona.
okay. Everyone does. It's E,
Well,
like the I is an E.
yeah, my
Ioanna.
name is Hyder, but people call me Hater, which is funnier, right?
No one calls you a thief?
Well, I was in the military for a long time, so I go by my last name usually because I'm still in
Okay.
the military world, working around military. So sometimes we go by last name. So Hater,
Mm.
is everybody's favorite because my first name is not that, you know, funny.
I like a thief. I'll call you a thief.
Now tell me your last name though.
Oh, Manjuridu.
See, it rolls off far better, right?
I
Because
know.
if I
One
try to
time
spell it,
I gave like, my card to pay at a restaurant, and the guy comes back and is like, the whole alphabet is in your name. It's hilarious.
yeah, like for startups, right? Um, you get to network with so many people, you get to know so many people, and then you get to learn different names. So your name is very unique. I have never come across anybody with those alphabets put together. But yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Like, this is middle of the week on a Wednesday, you probably have a lot going on, and you're taking the time out to engage on a conversation on a live webinar, so people can ask you about your startups. People can ask you about AI machine learning that you are involving with your startup, and we can go dive deep into it as much as we want based on the questions that people ask. So if anybody's listening, I cannot tell who's here participating, but drop your comment. I see Tamir is here. So Tamir, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're in the conversation, you're interested about startups, you're interested about AI machine learning, or you're just looking for ideas, or you're looking for motivation to get started on startups, whatever the case is, let us know in the comments, so that way we can turn our conversations towards you and answer your questions. So without further ado, Iona,
It's okay. It's okay.
Iona,
Go.
please make an introduction that is far better than mine.
Awesome. Well, where do I even start? I came in the US 7 years ago from Greece. I came for studies. I studied psychology and communications first for my bachelor's, and then I did talent development and strategic management for my master's. And then it kind of all came together, and I realized that I'm very passionate about helping people reach their full potential, personally and professionally, understanding that they're their own worst enemy, right? And nothing can limit us unless we put the limit to ourselves.
That's right.
And then I somehow found myself in startups. So I started working at Optivio, which is a B2B revenue AI platform helping marketers and sales boost revenue in a nutshell, leveraging more than 150 different intent signals in addition to network sales. And I worked there initially as an HR and talent development manager. And what I quickly realized is that especially tech startups, but startups in general, need to grow so fast. And although they hire young people because it's cheaper labor, they need to really make them superstars,
Mhm.
but they don't spend the right money on it, or they can find cost effective resources that are personalized enough to help their employees with soft skills such as communication, collaboration, and leadership, that are the skills they need to excel. And in that context, I was really inspired, and I did extreme research on what's out there. And I said to myself, I'm not satisfied with anything I see, so why I don't create something myself? Which is, long story short, when we created the team to build Dextego, so Guy, who's also the founder of Optivio, saw that value. He was our first investor. He became our executive chairman, and also we built a strategic partnership with Optivio to embed our product in it for AI coaching for sales. And then my co-founder, Sean Vasquez, who's also the CTO, we came together and we said, we'll need to make something which is fun, interactive, engaging, that people love and want to come back daily to train and challenge themselves so they can exponentially grow their skill set over time, no matter the role and industry. And here we are today, building Dextego, which will launch 1st of June. So we're super, super excited. And we want to build a community of lifelong learners, people who are serious about becoming better humans and better professionals, making the world a little better, at least in our eyes. So, big intro, but that's about me.
Well, the soft skills, right? I want to give you a quick example of what
Mhm.
happens when you are going through the process of learning the soft skills, and you don't realize how far advanced you are in your soft skills because there's no matrix, there's no measure, so that way you can compare yourselves again. So everything you told me about your startup, it resonated right away with me. Is this is the way I am able to practice, not only practice, but put the matrix together to say like, this is what I have to achieve, right? The
Mhm.
goals that I have, because I can tell you, um, I'll tell you who my role model is, right? It's
Um,
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I have watched him talk hours and hours and hours, right? He's an astrophysicist and he does podcasts. He does National Geographic's TV show, and he talks to people. And, like every time he has to discuss a topic and he has a wealth of information, the way he's conveying it, right? Having a wealth of information is great, right?
mm,
How deep you are able to go in, great. But how you're able to have people listen, you can never get that feedback in real time and never be able to measure how people understood what you had to say with those wealth of knowledge and depth of knowledge is very hard to measure, right?
mhm.
So it resonated with me right away. And one other person that I really have been listening a lot to is Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris. Just the opposite spectrum of Neil deGrasse Tyson, because they have set of depth of knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that they have, but how they present it and how they're perceived is two different side of the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Because they're conveying messages and they're only gaining certain part of the audience to stick around and say like, let me hear more about that. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, Sam Harris is definitely a difficult one to keep up with, right? Because he has the way of presenting this information. You really have to sit down and listen. Where Neil deGrasse Tyson, like I can pop that at any time, just like I'm about to put on some music. I'm like Neil deGrasse Tyson is the music to my ear, right? Um, and general public, unless they're continuously engaged in a sales call or continuously engaged in a public forum, there's no way of getting that feedback. And once you do get enough feedback that you have to work and struggle towards, right? You don't have a way to measure who will you compare yourself against, and where are you trying to get to, and what level of soft skills are you trying to achieve, right? Um, Very, very important. I think
Yeah.
I love everything you're trying to provide here because I can tell you, without a sales team that performs really, really in coherent manner, uniform way, your administrative and your product development team can only go so far. And I have my own
Mm.
startup, and that is my only concern at this point. How
Yeah,
do I
and
build
a
it?
lot of people, I think, feel the same. But what I liked about your story about the role model too is that apart from what you say and how it connects, like on a cognitive level, to the audience, is how they make you feel. Like if you leave a room and you feel lesser than the person, or you don't feel motivated that you can get there,
Mm,
all this plays a huge role on whether or not you want to listen to them again, if you want to go back. 'Cause
right.
content might be great, but how it makes you feel.
That's right. So I coach people on sales, and
Mhm.
one of the ways that they can measure how effective they were is by you know how the audience would like to commit to come back, follow up, right? Um, I think Tamir is still is listening in. So Tamir, can probably talk a little bit more about that as well, because in negotiations, you want to develop a relationship. And when you're negotiating with somebody, which is sales, right? As you're negotiating, you want to be able to say, how do we commit ourselves to follow up in this conversation? Because it's not a one-off deal, right? Just because we did a sales today, I never want to see you again. Well,
Yeah.
those are not type of sales that we want to have in the world, right? But in a typical manner, you would want to have a person commit, and you would want to follow up with that commitment, right? And that's one of the ways to measure. But we need more matrix than just that. That is just a surface level, right?
Hmm.
What are some of those black swan information that we haven't been able to discover? Um,
Hmm.
which is that black swan is that information that not necessarily what me and you think is relevant in this negotiation, but because we asked the right questions, because we engaged correctly, because we've been heard very in a deep level, that we are able to ready to give out those information, and from that we are able to discover, like, okay, wait a second, neither one of us knew this information would be important, but now let's target that. Let's engage on that topic because it sounds as very important to you. I didn't know it was important to you. Did you know it was important to you? Right? Um, so amazing. Like all the startups are very, very important, and especially because it's AI machine learning augmented and assisted by an AI machine learning. And that's what we're here. This webinar
Yes,
is AI machine learning.
yes, let's do it.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit more about your journey into the AI machine learning side of things. I mean, of course, I cannot fathom how you would go about it without machine learning. I mean, AI part of it. Let's skip that part, right? That's far out into the universe. But machine learning is what we have today. I think machine learning is what enables your capability. So, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on machine learning.
As I told you when we talked last time, I'm not the technical mind behind the startups I've worked with, which is actually what inspires me more in terms of thinking about applied AI, machine learning. Like, how can we use this from a non-technical perspective? Like, what is the outcome first? And I like you had a slide where you described the difference, like with the processing of the food. I don't know if you're about to show it. I love that because it's really about the thinking. Like sometimes you get lost unless you think of the outcome. And my first experience with machine learning or AI was again in Activio when I was just wowed by the depth of signals and data we have to deal with on a daily basis. We monitor at least billion data points a day. And I'm like, okay, wow. So what do we do with all that data? What is the outcome? How do we benefit the users? And to answer really fast, it's all about what the client wants to achieve. Are they focused on, let's say, just getting SQLs? Are they focused on brand awareness? Like, what is the main goal? What group do they target? What personas? What geographic location? And all these things is super important to feed the machine for it to learn and understand what's your market, where the interested buyers are, and what warm intros you can do through your strategic network to get access to these accounts, and as a consequence, boost your revenue. And connecting it back to sales, what I found out is that a lot of times people don't even know their go to market. And so you might be selling them something and they see the value, but they don't know how to use it to its max. So then your salesman turns into a consultant. You have to really guide and basically lead the client to success. And I think that's something common with a lot of AI tools I see today that are just not being used in its maximum capacity. And it's such a shame because we have access to tremendous technology, and either on a regulation standpoint and like data privacy, it's just not being done correctly from the technical standpoint, or from the consumer standpoint, it's not used appropriately.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, no, look, when you don't get caught up and how things have been and where things are going, right? What you end up with is that you look at the inventory that you have today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, I can't get rid of this inventory because when I had this inventory done, we had a 5-year life cycle for this. So we did a cost analysis based on how we will be able to use this until 2025 or 2030.
Mm.
You don't want to get rid of your inventory. What you want to do is incorporate a machine learning system in between those inventories, right? So instead of throwing the baby with the bathwater, you are able to say like, okay, what do we do what we have today, and how do we start with AI machine learning as we make sure we optimize the benefits of the products that we already paid for, right? So what you have today is not something that you have to get rid of today just because you have machine learning. Now, having said that, some things you cannot do without machine learning. And I mentioned that already because what you're trying to achieve is heavily relying on machine learning capability because let's not even jump into the billions of data that you're taking in, right? But I do want to say this for sales purposes. Anybody who's listening, you have to reverse engineer from that total vision of what it is that you're trying to accomplish as a startup and start
Mm.
thinking of what it is that you already do on a daily basis. And let me tell you what a human brain does on a daily basis. Every nanosecond, we're collecting 10 million bits of data per second. Let me repeat that. I think I messed it up. It's 10 million bits of data per second we collect as a human brain, as in our 5 sensors are pushing that much data into our brain, and our brain processes all those data instantaneously and is able to give us the summarization of that data and give us what it is that we need, which is about 30 to 50 bits per second.
Mm-hmm.
11 million bits per second that we're collecting, we're only utilizing 30 to 50 bits per second of this data that we're getting pushed into our brain using our 5 sensors: tactile, your auditory, your vision, and your smell and your taste, right? All these informations are continuously being fed into your brain. Now, I'll give you one example. Why do you need to worry about what the temperature of this room is, right? It's as the same as it was, a few seconds ago, right? So, but your brain has to be able to process that, hey, it's heating up. This room is
Mm.
hot. Every nanosecond is clicking on a delta to find out the difference between last second and this second, right? But that comes through those 11 million bits per second, right? I think I changed the number here. I think it's between 10 to
Okay,
12.
I got the
But
point.
so if you think about that 10 to 12 million bits per second, you are collecting that for all of your life. As long as you've been alive, you've been collecting it, give or take that much data on an every second basis, right? So you're full of information. So not to replicate that part of us is a missed opportunity. And that's the solution what machine learning brings to the table. Things that
Mm-hmm.
not just automate by software and coding. How do we incorporate AI and machine learning into the solutions that we cannot do with AI? We cannot do with coding and programming, right? So, given that information, I want you to also add another matrix to that. The matrix is using those 11 some millions per second data, you're making about 30,000 decisions a day. 30,000 decisions that you make every day requires about close to 86 billions of neurons and hundreds and trillions of synapses, right? To connect
I
this.
love that. I love that because it connects to neuroplasticity, which is something I also talk a lot about. I love that.
And those are the matrix that you have to think about and say, like, okay, well, where am I in my startup and that the future startups that I will build? How can I solve problems that are worldwide, if not local, at least? How do I buy a system that is able to produce that much data for me, or process that much data for me, or optimize that much data for me? Right. So you have to think about it in multiple levels, but all of them are humans, right? As in there's a human at the end of whatever startups you're trying to solve, right? Um, these capabilities that we're developing today, majority of them exist. That's the good news. It's just missing you, whoever you are, right? The startup,
Yes.
right? You have the startup and you are solving one of the problems, but you'll be able to grow and scale that startup over time because you'll be able to optimize it because you're able to say like, okay, I'm looking at this problem here, but this problem is nobody's taking off. I'll take that problem as well, and I'll continue optimizing more data sets for better use purposes, right? I know I said a lot, but like, let's jump into some of the slides. But before we jump in, let's check in with LinkedIn if there's any comments or message that maybe we need to focus in on. Okay.
Yeah, just quickly wanted to say, something about the neuroplasticity that you mentioned too. So, Dextego operates with challenges, like personalized scenarios according to your role and industry. So, back to the example of a sales user, a challenge with your AI coach could be, hey, how would you handle this difficult objection of a client? You record yourself giving an answer, and it analyzes your facial recognition, like pattern, pitch, tone, and obviously content of what you said, and it gives you suggestions on how to improve it. Now, the reason why we've done it like that is because we want to engineer challenges in someone's everyday, because one day you work and there's no challenge, your day is smooth. But if that's the case, then you're not learning, because we all know we learn under pressure and under the challenges. And this is where this neuroplasticity takes place. No matter your age, you can still grow, and especially over time, because the challenges become better through machine learning and understanding your skill set and what you still need to work on, what you've aced, then you never stop learning. And that's the beauty of it. Like, as long as you trust yourself that you can learn and you won't hit a wall, then you will always amaze yourself.
Yeah, you're the only person that can stop yourself from doing something.
Yeah. I mean, think of yourself 5 years ago. Were you the same person?
Absolutely no.
Exactly.
I think what we are and what we are trying to accomplish with machine learning, we have to see the similarities, right? So Tamir just asked me, hey, if you're a founder, you have all these issues, like you said, variables, right? The variables of the day, as in one day everything goes as scheduled, the next day nothing goes as planned, right? So there's a variables in your days. But like, if you think about it, Tamir, would you like to have a startup where, as a startup founder, you have a digital twin? Right? A digital twin that behaves just like you, who's able to schedule things for you. Because if you can understand one thing about CEOs and startups, is that you have to meet millions of people before you even find a simple traction. As in, I'm through that journey right now. I have to meet continuously large amount of people to say who it is that I will actually, commit and follow up with, right? Because I cannot keep up with everybody. But if I was able to schedule using AI machine learning technology, if I was able to do my calendar better, if I was able to follow up better and send more emails and have those emails be actually processed better, why wouldn't I pay for that? Like, that's literally saying I can save tons of hours in the week by having a digital twin, right? So if
Absolutely.
you look at it from a digital twin perspective, I think everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm not that scared of AI machine learning anymore, right? Because if you think about AI machine learning world right now, lots of fear and skepticism, right? Yesterday there was Sam Altman going in front of the Congress and trying to calm Congress down from all the dystopian scenarios, right? But if you look away from the dystopian scenarios and you start looking at it from your personal level, as in, what does your brain need and how does your brain function, and what are some of the things that your brain necessarily don't have to function process anymore, but a machine can, you would want that. You would say, like, well, that's something that is very needed.
The note takers, yeah, in the meetings and the summaries afterwards. I mean, that's amazing that we have this today. It saves you a tremendous amount of time, or even mental stimuli, taking notes and remembering things afterwards, and follow-ups, and what did we say, or is that what they said, or making things up. It's amazing.
Now imagine healthcare industry taking notes, right? A doctor's note is different than my notes. Which one is more sensitive? A doctor's note. If the doctor's notes are more accurate and the patients are able to revisit that for medicinal purposes, the nurses are able to review that and add their notes into it, so that way they can create a summary of what a patient needs to read instead of the whole script, right? See, those capabilities are building on top of each other, and when you start looking at a optimizing fashion, we just optimize it right now, right? You said, well, you have scheduling, you have your calendar, and you have your notes taking because you're in a meeting. We just optimized it. One AI feeds another AI. We optimized it, right? So we collect data, we make decisions, and we continuously optimize it, right? um, I think this is a slide
Very
you
good
mentioned.
slide, yes.
Okay, so I use this slide a lot because I'm not the person to cook, but I love to eat, right?
Same
I always
here.
think about like, okay, as I'm eating, like, what are the processes in the cooking that could have been done better? So I'm the critique. I don't really necessarily cook, and if I did cook, I would be a really bad at cooking. But here's my example here, right? If you think about what I was talking about earlier, the inventory that you already have. I mean, I'm not talking about a single warehouse full of inventory. I'm talking about inventory of software that you purchase, coding and programming language that you've inserted into your business process. Your business logic has lots of pieces that are based on coding and programming, right? You're not going to throw any of this away, right? But what you have to do is look at it from the full feedback loop. How does that cycle begin and how does it end? And if I may, I will tell you, traditional programming where we are today is only half of that feedback loop, right? Because what we can do is take multiple grocery items, bring it to the kitchen, go through the process of turning that grocery into a food that you will actually consume, right? Now, if you think about it, you do that process over and over, and there's lots of variables in between. Because sometimes you want to cook Boston chicken style chicken, right? Meals. Some days you want to cook it like your mom and your grandma's chicken, right? Everybody cooks chicken so many different ways. There's variables, but not every day you want to cook it the same way, right? But if you're coding and programming languages, wouldn't be able to do that variable for you. It wouldn't be able to capture that amazing recipe that your mom has versus your grandma's recipe, right? It's two different recipes. Coding and programming will have to be executed accordingly. But now, if you shift that variable in a spectrum and say, well, I don't like grandma's and mom's chicken only, I like all these other types of variables. Now your data increases in size because your variables have grown, right?
Mm-hmm.
What controls that variable really, really well is machine learning algorithm. And the way the machine learning algorithm does that is by saying, go through the same process. Remember, first cycle of the feedback loop, which is you go to the grocery, you get the chicken, get the groceries, and bring it to your kitchen, and then you cook the chicken, right? Well, the other side of that feedback loop, where you have done all this process, now you feed a machine learning system to learn how to cook that chicken in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Your data increases over time, right? Because you've been able to cook that chicken over time, but now you're able to cook hundreds of thousands of chickens and cook hundreds of thousands of chickens in different ways, right? So your capability grows, but your data also grows in size, and it closes the full feedback loop for you. And that's the power of adopting machine learning capability, because you're not necessarily throwing the old styles away. You're adapting to the new ways of controlling your data and building more data on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went really, really fast, but I hope I didn't miss anything. Did that make sense? The whole picture here?
No, no, it definitely does. And it kind of remind me also, I was reading something the other day about, how people, to your point, are a little afraid, and the new regulations will be all about opting in. Like sometimes the AI might know what your preference would be, what type of chicken you want to eat that day, but you have to allow that recommendation to come in. You can't just consume it because it knows better than you. So, that element of when does the human interaction stop and what's autopilot, it's super interesting.
Oh, there's so much to talk about, but let's get into the nitty gritty, the terminologies that we have to start on machine learning with, right? If you think about it, a machine learning capability is just like a software capabilities or programming language capabilities, right? You need to have an input of data and have the data be processed and provide an output, right? So machine learning is the same. You have to start with an input data, and machine learning has a hidden layer, the black box, the neural network, just like our brain. It's able to process this information and have an output being given, which will make sense to all the users, not just some of the users. users, right? It's able to provide a vast amount of services to all sorts of users and all sorts of levels because it's able to process the variables using neural network, right? Where coding languages, it's difficult to have those that much variable be processed, right? So if you look at it from the perspective of a child who identifies a fire and is able to label it to a point that says, well, is this a real fire or the fake fire? But if it's a real fire, from my previous experience, I can tell you this is hot, I'm going to stay away from it. Or child will try it again and say, like, well, let me try it again and see if it's the same as last time, right? There's variable in learning. So all machine learning, just like our brain, starts with identifying and has the capability of labeling and labeling it accurately over time, right? Because you're continuously making that decisions to touch it or not to touch it, you are able to make those decisions, and those decisions gives birth to the capability of predictability, right? Because you make those decisions 30,000 times a day, you are able to predict much faster because you know where the fires are usually because you've identified it so many times and you have labeled it with high accuracy for very many, many times. And if you start thinking about machine learning from the perspective of identifying, labeling, and decision making, you'll be able to ask the correct questions for your startup purposes, for your business logic purposes, or any purposes that you're looking to develop an AI machine learning capability for, because that's the ultimate day one of machine learning. Data sets and data calculations and all these things will come down the pipe, but you have to start on a white paper and start drawing out how it is that you will engage, what it is that you're identifying, and how are you labeling it, and what sort of decisions and predictability are you building around it.
These were amazing. I read them. That's crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at the startups, you have like a small world that we call our head, right? That's how big the world is. And for me to realize, like, what are the other startups and how challenging are those startups and what are they doing to the startups? It's like you cannot comprehend, right? Because I thought I've seen all sorts of startups when I was in the incubator trying to get my startup going, and then I realized, well, I only know 10 of them. Right? And then you look at these numbers, you're like, wait, there's about 12,000 that has been just signed in 1 year in 2020. What has happened since 2021 and 2022? How many other startups are there? And how many of them are my competition? Right? And as a startup, how many people am I employing versus my competition? Right? How are they performing their task? How are they able to do it faster than I can and better than I can? Right? Not that we're in competition for customers, because if they sign with one customer, I'll sign with a different customer. But I still have to be aware of the fact that they can do it better than me, and my customers will probably benefit from their services more than my services, right? So startup is a number game, and I think that's why I appreciate this little numbers here, because it kind of gives you a glimpse into what's happening out in the world,
Yeah, and I mean the war for talent, you mentioned like who's hiring, it's a huge problem. And you see today also in every recession, like, yes, there's all these job opportunities, but all the good talent is already hired. So that leaves a pool of people who cannot be employed, and it's a real issue. Like it's I don't know, like I know a lot of people who are trying to be employed, and they're skilled, but they might not be that A player that startups looking to hire.
I got a question over here from Omar. He's asking about how is this relevant to the startups? I think the attempt here is to do an introduction of AI machine learning, first of all, and second of all, to kind of start formulating like how it is that you will approach AI machine learning. Because what happens with the majority of the machine learning, and there's a number behind it, that majority of the machine learning projects actually fail, right? They don't deploy because at the end of the development phase, they realize that return on investment is not worth deploying, because by the time you deploy, there's more cost associated than just from developing it, right? So if you deploy, how are you able to benefit from investing into this development, right? So if you look at the full life cycle, just until the deployment phase, you have certain cost, and then after that, you have more cost. So it's very important that in a design phase as a startup, you start thinking about if I ever have to spend a penny in AI machine learning capability, how it is that I start the design process very well so I can deploy it as a startup and not be on the negatives when it comes to after I deployed it, right? Because there's a cost in monitoring that AI machine learning capability and to deploy, to trigger all the actions that you need in a deployed environment, right? So uh, once I kind of talked about the AI machine learning pieces, now we're going to get into the fact of like, okay, how do you want to start formulating your thought process about where it is that you will spend the penny in order to develop that AI machine learning capability, right? So when we think about life, there's two things certain in life. One is death, the other one is tax, right? So I picked the tax as an example to say, like, if you're thinking about a startups and you're looking for ways of engaging with the industry as your startup, let's look at tax, right? If you are a startup, you'll have all sorts of need for accessing capital, your need for scalability, the need for talent acquisition, right? So I picked regulatory compliance as a piece because you have, as a startup, you have to meet regulatory compliance in order to stay in business, right? But if you're a startup and you're thinking of like, how do I provide service around regulatory compliance? That's what we're going to get into next, right? And as you're going down to like a regulatory exploration of thinking like, okay, as a startup, how can I provide on a regulatory environment like governance, risk, and compliance (GRCs)? How in the RegTech, regulatory technology world, how can I develop AI machine learning capability? Because there's lots of need for that. There's a need for engaging, and this number will tell you that investment in the regulatory technology is going up, right? Who does regulatory technology? Accenture, KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, all the big consulting firms for all the big industries, the Fortune 500s, right? So I think going down that rabbit hole of tax, if you start looking at tax requirements, right, you start finding your niche. And that's what you have to do with all the other industries. Any startups you want to do, you go down that rabbit hole of finding out where it is that you fit in, right? So lots of people in this country, specifically just in the US, has a tax as a profession, right? They work around tax, they do tax. And if you pick all the professions you can have around taxing, and estate planning, imagine that, right? We talked about death and tax. Well, there's a tax after you die too, right? It doesn't go away. But as a tax analyst, what are some of the things that you're worried with, right? And how do you create an AI machine learning capability as a tax analyst for your organization, right? Predictive analytics, data validation, optimizing opportunities, right? How do you go about doing all these? If you had a virtual assistant like we talked about earlier, the digital twin, that ability to say, if I type in a prompt and I'm able to get the answers I need, great. That's a user end. But if you reverse engineer it down to yourself to say, as a startup, how can I help the tax analyst to have a digital twin, to have them schedule, help them send out emails, understand what it is they do on a day-to-day basis, and as the machine learns it, it's able to replicate it with high accuracy and with most confidence, right? It's able to do your scheduling, your calendar, your email sending out. Plus, it's helping you to research regulatory compliance. It's helping you to understand risk assessments, right? It's able to do pattern recognition to help you understand what it is that you provide as a tax analyst to the people that are looking for your services, right? That's just one career path that I just picked as a sample, right? I'm sure, if you're thinking about it from your perspective, you can go on forever now. You're like, wait a second, we could do some of that for ourselves because as a startup, we need this, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about taxes, that remind me, how now they're trying to basically understand all the laws that we'll have in a couple of years around AI and all this. And they're saying that if like Uber hires a robot to drive the car, that has to also pay taxes, basically like a labor tax. Instead of the employee, you still have a robot doing your job, and what will happen to all the unemployed people? Like, who will give money for them to live and survive? So, what's your opinion about that? Like, and the founders that are creating such technologies, thinking they're gonna save so much money, and then they're going to be hit with all these taxes. Should we say something around that topic? Because I feel like a lot of founders start with a vision of, they're doing something great for the world and they're pushing technology, but some others are just building to sell and they're not taking that into account.
Yeah, I think like I as a startup, like I had to reformat and reconfigure my ideas over and over. I had to figure out like, okay, what is it I want to sell today? But that's great. But how is it I sustain myself 10 years down the road, if not 20 until I die, right? And how much taxes do I have to pay on top of that, right? So how do you keep up with that 30% tax bracket to say like, well, if I'm going to pay 30%, how much do I actually bring home? And if I bring home a certain amount, how much do I actually pay in taxes? So that way I can always keep up with the level of cost that I have incurred over time, right? So you have to look at it from so many different perspectives. And not saying that AI machine learning will help you with that today, but it is getting there very easily. I think Omar also asked like, what are the costs in these sort of investments, right? I think I'll give you a simple visualization. ARC investment mapped it out, said like, the current level of AIs that we have, the large language model that is able to interact using just keyboard and chatting with people, maybe in 2030, the cost will come down under $100 to be able to afford that, because everybody will go on about having a chat bot on their own, right? As in a chat GPT like system that is based on your need. Your need to say like, I feel like I'm going to schedule something today, and this is what I need to do for the scheduling. And the chat GPT like system is able to learn the full process and replicate that full process with the variables, and do it for under $100, right? Now here's the shocking part of it. They didn't realize how fast human can innovate. So when ChatGPT came out, within 6 months of ChatGPT release, in Stanford, they were able to build another chatbot that only costed $600 to build. So if you do the number, ARC investors were thinking 8 years down the road, they'll be able to develop AI machine learning capability for under $100. But within 6 months of ChatGPT, we were able to create another ChatGPT-like system for $600. Because what it did, it was able to train off of ChatGPT and Google Bird, and have that system create another AI system that's able to perform almost as good as ChatGPT, well, with some exception of security risk. You cannot get cheap on security. Security is always going to be expensive, right? So I think just to answer your question and Omar's question, like, if we do, how much does it cost, and what's the return on investment? The return on investment, what you're looking at today, thinking like, given that information that I had probably 5 years ago, I would think it would cost thousands and thousands of dollars, right? Most expensive part today is the people that are subject matter expert and that's able to engage on this topic with you. The consulting fees, the advisement fees, the capability to employ them is probably the most expensive part of the product development, right? And then to maintain that product down the road is another cost. But the employing those people is most likely the largest cost you have. But to develop that product, it is much easier than what it used to be 10, 15, or just even 5 years ago. Because if you look at what Google and Amazon and not Amazon specifically, but AWS, Amazon, and Microsoft is doing today, just in Microsoft, you can type in a prompt and say, create me a solution for a problems that I have right now. And how would you go about fixing it? Boom, 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 right? ChatGPT, it gives you all the answers. And that's just ChatGPT that we know about, the one that we experience with. But inside of Microsoft, they have better ways to do that. As in, it's actually doing coding behind the scene in order to develop that product for you.
Isn't the thought that, Microsoft one day might decide to just not have it open anymore crazy, and we might not be able to use it, and we already are kind of dependent. A lot of people, like, in their jobs are dependent on ChatGPT to perform.
You
I
just
can.
gave me a horror story in my head that I have to live my life without ChatGPT.
That is insane. I mean, I don't know. It's
I don't,
the
I
rate
don't,
of innovation is amazing, as you said.
I don't think the cat is ready to get out of the bag or get back in the bag. The cat is out of the bag already, right?
I mean, I
Um,
think so too. I think so. Or else I wouldn't be building a business using it as well.
the possibilities are endless, and to go back into the bag and people just say like, we're not going to use AI from now on. I think that is not going to happen. Somebody is going to develop an AI. What Microsoft was able to do is capture the optimization process and optimize to a point that billions of users are able to access it without that latency, right? You ask a question, you get the answer instantaneously, rather than to say, wait a couple hours, I'll get back to you on email, right?
Mm.
That's what we do as a human right now. But
Yeah.
ChatGPT is able to give you that answer right off the bat. Um, I think there's a whole lot of potentials. This optimization is only going to optimize further. And as we talked about, there's a fear that Microsoft might take it away. Well, they were talking about pausing all the AI labs with their AI research and innovation for 6 months. That scared the hell out of me. I wasn't for it, but then again, I saw their points about optimization, because once you're able to optimize, you can optimize it to a point you can do bad things with it, or you can optimize it to a point that you are doing really great things with it. And just like internet, you have great things and you have bad things, but when it comes to any product, there's always a negative and positive, right? Um,
Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
didn't know
I'm very hopeful that nobody will ever take AI away from us.
that. Awesome.
Speaking of optimization, this is another slide that I want you to kind of visualize and understand that this is how you optimize. Because if you look at it from a traffic prediction purposes, well, traffic prediction is not the only capability that machine learning of AI traffic prediction will be able to do. It can be converted, it can be optimized, it could be adopted for many other purposes. And if you start drawing the map between traffic prediction and stock market trading, and let's say, for example, virtual personal assistant, how are you able to mix and match this machine learning capabilities for better adaptation and optimizing the use cases out of them, right? So if you are developing a technology today and you're thinking of, AI machine learning is a must, and you're thinking of how would you will scale it, well, start developing and designing in a way that you leave room for optimization, right?
Mhm.
Optimization to say like, this is not a closed off system that no other AI can interact with it, right? So as a startup, those are the little tips and ideas that you want to take away in your design phase, because you want to be able to design a system that is not closed off, right? Closed off as in it's not able to interact with the other AI system and provide more and better scalable services.
Yeah, at Dextego we use both, speech recognition, image recognition, the language translation, so you can have an AI code that speaks your language. And I would say it's kind of like a virtual personal assistant, but for coaching of soft skills. But I don't think that, people will just focus on one. It's like once you start, opening one little window, then you see the other application, the others, and then you make something super powerful
Right.
altogether. That's the best, because I can see the language translation applying to everything,
Yeah, and language translation. Like, say for example, one of the presentations I did, we talked about the fact that medical diagnosis and language translation, right? So you just
Absolutely.
mentioned, like, if you have a medical diagnosis in Philippines, how do you translate it to Tagalog, right?
Mm.
You're able to do it instantaneously for any languages that you need, so the doctor doesn't have to sit there and call up the interpreters, right?
Yeah.
You're able to do that instantaneously. So all these machine learning capabilities, this is just some of the few core ones, right? This is the most low hanging fruit, the most popular ones that we are seeing already and we are being impacted by. I'm not even discussing like military technology, marine technology, or technologies that are like just not in this list right now, but it's out there, right? And you start incorporating all of this into this capabilities, you have a use case that millions and billions of people can benefit from, right? And that's what I mean by scaling. Even if you start with hundreds, you have to focus on how do you scale it over time, so that way you can capture a bigger market share, if not bigger service base. Like I said, people are buying your service or using your service for their daily needs. We're coming like a little bit close to the end, but I hope this presentation was helpful because went really, really fast. And this is what I do every week. I try to cover everything AI machine learning in less than 50 minutes. And on top of that, a specific topic and an industry, but do it really, really fast, So if there's any questions, any sort of concerns or any type of comments that you have, please feel free to share here or, share it on the inbox. We'll be able to get back to you. Usually what I do is I go back to the comments and see how I can more um, optimize the answer that I've given, right? Sit down and think about answering that question a little better. But feel free to drop your questions there and give us your feedback, how it is that we can improve this conversation, because every week we cover different topics. Today's conversation is about startups, right? Previously we did healthcare. Previously we did education, finance world. We talked about the fact that there's a need for project management in AI, right? All sorts of AI capabilities from different perspective. But one of the reasons I have this slide up is to say it's not always just about Chat GPT like capability, right? Even though Chat GPT can provide you with some of these other AI capabilities, you want to add more value to ChatGPT. You want to add more value to what Microsoft and Google is focusing on, right? As a small startup, you can utilize either their technology or build one yourself and add more value to the whole AI machine learning capability. So one of the ones that one of the I like the most is like when you're in a cybersecurity, right? I like all the cybersecurity topics because it's such a wide spectrum of threats that we have out there. To do network analysis, to do pattern recognitions, to understand all this pattern recognition and network analysis through NLP, right? As in you're able to interact with this information using NLP. So instead of looking through the data sets that looks boring, you're able to just use a prompt to say, explain to me why am I getting hacked and how am I getting hacked? And what are the repercussions of how I'm getting hacked? And you're able to do that in live, in real time using prompts, just by having a conversation with a computer.
What I find super interesting is sentiment analysis, right? Like the ability to understand maybe the conflict when, like, if your facial expression show one type of sentiment and your actual words say another, and how accurate AI can be in understanding that. I mean, that is super interesting, and especially for what we're doing also with the challenges and understanding your skill set and what you still need to work on. I think this is something we're definitely like doubling down on, and I'm keen to see how people will perceive that, because sometimes AI can know you better than you even know yourself. You might think you come across as one thing, but in reality it's something else. So you can only see that in the peer-to-peer interactions with others, and how, coming back full circle to what we're saying earlier with sales, it's a lot about also how the other person felt, like what you said came across as.
Right. The sentiment analysis is something that Microsoft Teams has built into their suite of product. So you're able to understand all the dialogues that are happening within your organization and understand what are the sentiments within your organization, right? You're able to see a full picture of, is my organization communicating negatively, uplifting ways, empowering each other, or are they downright just not engaging at all, right? Whatever the case is, a sentiment analysis, I find that to be fascinating, because when you use natural language processing for an optimization, that is the first key piece that I'll go after, right? To say, like, if you're writing a prompt, why are you writing a prompt, and why is it taking you so long to write that prompt correctly? And what do I mean by that, right? So let's say, for example, in Chat GPT, you ask it a question and it doesn't get the question correct the first time. And you have to go through multiple iterations of asking that questions in order to get to the right answer with most high accuracy and least amount of errors, right? Well, if you're able to do that, like, how do I help the user to write better, right? The prompt generator, how am I able to use the sentiment analysis to figure out, like, what sort of user are you? Are you a native English speaker? I'm not a native English speaker, But if I have to speak Mandarin right now, I will probably do a bad job of writing the prompt in Mandarin, right? But how do I help the Mandarin writer to write the prompt very clearly so that ChatGPT is able to react faster and in the first time, right? So that sentiment analysis goes all over the place: languages, organization, just the user experience, sales. I love sentiment analysis. This is awesome.
And interviews for HR, that's a huge one. You can incorporate it for performance reviews, understand if the person is improving. So yeah, the sky's the limit with sentiment analysis.
Yeah, Hire View, HIREVUE. They have tons, and I think close to 3 million interviews that they have recorded and analyzed all the ways that they can analyze it by asking the right question, by understanding, what the job title is, right? If it's a coder, what sort of questions do you want to ask them, and how do they react, and how do you make decisions about that reaction, right? Yeah, the the possibilities here are like pretty endless. So let's take a break. I think we are close to the end of the hour. I know we all have to go back to work. I have to go back to work.
Yes.
It's been a fun conversation because I love having this dialogue with people to see, how different things that I can learn. Because things that I've learned from you so far is far different than any other conversations I've had so far, right? Because to focus on the soft skill part of it, it definitely takes a startup to take it to an AI machine learning level, right? Because when you have to have a human coach to help you with your soft skills, that human is only available few days a week, few hours here and there. But whatever the case is, they're not available all the time. And not everybody's available all the time to learn. So when you're in a learning mode, how do you sit down in front of a computer and say, well, time to learn how to improve my soft skills? I have the
And
tool right in front of me, right?
yeah, and on top of that, humans can be biased. And indeed, it takes so long for people to learn through experiences about the soft skills because you need some life experiences and silences to learn. But that's a little unfair in my eyes, which is why we wanted to shorten that time, accelerate that learning so people can use these incredible skills to move further along in their careers and have an impact, a positive impact to the community. So I think the key is yes, the time, the cost, and the personalization that machine learning allows us to do today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, well, we will broadcast this conversation for next week with different time zones in mind, because not everybody probably was able to attend. So if you're listening to this conversation and you've benefited from any of this conversation here, put that in the comment. Let us know how it is that we can improve the conversation, how it is that we can improve the engagement. Let's do a little bit of sentiment analysis on that chat box there, right?
Yes, let's do
With
it.
that, let's hear from you. How do we get in touch with you? How does people that are listening to this conversation, how do they get in touch with you? And how do they engage? So that way, they can reach out to you and ask you questions, or if not, do business.
Yes, of course. So my email is my first name, Ioanna, Ioanna, at
Easy.
dextego.com. And our website, where you can also sign up for our MVP release June 1st, is DEXTEGO, dextego.com. And of course, LinkedIn, our social media, is perfect as well. Welcome any interactions about soft skills, talent development, startups, everything we discussed today. Always love connecting with new people and making synergies happen. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for making the time. Definitely check out Dextego, and their product is on my favorite list already. I am super pumped to test it out starting in June, and definitely will get in touch with you to help me learn more about your product, because I probably will stumble around for a little bit, but with your help, I'm sure I'll perfect it. And so, with that in mind, thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate
We'll
it.
we'll continue the conversation some other time. Take care.
Take care. Bye.